In this video, I'm going to show you how to decorate this candy theme cake, and it is pretty long, so I separated it in chapters so you can skip around to whatever part you'd like to watch. And I will also let you know how much I charged. So let's get started. All right, I'm going to start by covering this cake with fondant. I just got that out of the refrigerator. That icing is cold and hard, so I'm not going to mess it up. I'm getting piping gel all along the outside and then thinning it out with a little bit of water. And then I'm rolling out my fondant. Really, it's about 1/4 of an inch thick, and I'm covering my cake with this. Now, I do have a video where I go into complete detail on how I cover cakes with fondant, and I will link that in the description. But I'm using my little pinch technique to get a sharp edge at the very top, smoothing it with my fondant smoother. And then I like to cut off the excess fondant that's on the very bottom of the cake board and take a piece of fondant to smooth out the fondant. I'm going to add texture so it doesn't have to be perfect, but that looks good. I'm going to put that back in the refrigerator. Now I want to roll out the stripes. So I have fondant in a bunch of different colors and I'm rolling it out really long and tall so the stripes will fit on the cake. And then I'm taking my ribbon cutter and I'm going to cut a bunch of stripes here. So I'm cutting a straight edge on the bottom, and my cake is 7 inches tall. So I made sure that that was 7 inches. And then I'm just cutting a bunch of stripes. And then I just want to remove all of the fondant that's in between all of those pieces. And then I like to take my fingers and smooth out the edges to make sure it's not jagged. And then I want to take my rulers and straighten all of these so they dry very straight before I start on the next color. And I'm going to set that aside and do that for the other colors. Now for the gold ones, I did roll this out and I used my rolling pin, my textured rolling pin, to add some texture. I do have videos showing you how I do that, and that will be linked in the description, but I'm doing the same thing, and then I'm painting them gold with some Rollcom Super Gold mixed with lemon extract. I'll show that a little later in the video, but I want to make sure I get 2 coats on there. Now look at the clock, it's 4:11. I got that bottom tier out of the refrigerator. I'm marking an arrow to the front so I know I can start in the back. I'm holding a stripe up against the cake. I take my scissors, I snip it where it touches the top of the cake, and then I cut it off. So again, hold it up, take my scissors, make a little mark, then lift it up and cut a straight edge on the top, get some water behind it and stick it down. And I'm doing that the same thing for all of these colors. So I did light pink, white, dark pink, and then gold. And I use my little spatula to make sure that they are all perfectly vertical. And look at the clock going as I do this. This whole thing, this whole process, making the stripes, cutting them out, drying them, putting them on the cake, was probably about 1.5 to 2 hours. And that looks really good. I'm going to put this heavy cake back in the refrigerator. Now, I want to make the sparkles. I ran out of gold sparkles, so I'm mixing a little bit of white with the gold. Not a big deal because I'm going to be painting them gold. I will link that in the description for you. And I'm removing the tape that's holding this onto that little circle. I want to remove the tape and clean that little cardboard, get rid of all of that icing on there. And then I'm going to put this cake back on top. It's going to be so much easier for me to transfer it if I have that piece of tape removed. So I put it on a cookie sheet, and then I got some piping gel all along the outside of the cake. I want those sparkles to stick to this, so there needs to be a thick enough layer of piping gel so they'll all stick. And there's going to be another tier on top, so I'm not doing it all the way to the very center, but just making sure the entire thing is covered with the piping gel. That way these sparkles will stick. And I'm starting just by sprinkling a little bit on the top. I don't have enough. I should have ordered more, and I didn't have enough, so I had to use these sparingly. And I was like, crap, I shouldn't have removed that piece of tape. I didn't want this cake to slide off of that board, but I'm just trying to lift it up just a little bit so I can sprinkle these sparkles down the side of the cake. And again, I didn't have enough. Usually I cover the entire thing, but I'm taking my gloved hands and just pressing those down against the cake. And I do have a video where I go into detail on how I do this gold sparkle on a cake, and I will link that in the description for you. And then once I have that all on there, I'm taking that Rollcom Super Gold again. It's Rollcom Super Gold, and then I mix it with a little bit of lemon extract and in this little cup and make a little paste. And I will link that in the description for you if you'd like to purchase this. And I just do that all around the cake, making sure that I paint everything gold. And once that's done, I want to do a second coat just to deepen it up a little bit. And that looks really good. So I'm going to put this back in the refrigerator carefully because it's no longer attached to that cake board. Now I get that second to the bottom tier out of the refrigerator. Again, I want to remove it from that cake board that it's on and remove that tape and clean off the board, and then I'm going to put it back on. It's going to be so much easier for me to lift it once I have it all decorated. So I'm putting all those sprinkles in a cup. I got them on Amazon. I will link them below. And I'm getting a thick layer of piping gel all along the bottom of this tier. It needs to be kind of on the thicker side so these sprinkles will stick to the bottom. So there's got to be enough. Anyway, so I'm taking a little bit in my hand and pressing it against the side of the cake. And again, I have that tray underneath to catch any pieces that fall. And these are bigger sprinkles, so I'm trying to get some along the bottom, and then I'm going to take my fingers and some tweezers to just place all of these on here so there's no empty spaces. So I'm just finding like where I need to put these. You see what I'm doing? I'm just like placing them on individually. And then I'm taking my spatula and just really pressing these against the cake at the very bottom. I don't want them to stick to that cardboard once I lift it off. So I'm just making sure that I really press that in, and that looks good. I'm going to carefully put that back in the fridge because it's not attached to that board. Now I'm making the lollipops, so I'm rolling out some dark pink fondant and light pink fondant, and then I'm rolling it from one end to the other. And then I have to cut this on an angle. So I'm starting from the outside and cutting it on an angle to the inside. This way it'll sit flush with the very bottom. So you see how I'm pressing it in, getting a little bit of water down so it can stick, and then pressing it down. And I made 5 of those in total. Then I want to make the long lollipop. So I have these skewers. They're about 12 inches to 14 inches long. And I don't want to cover the entire thing, just like the top half. So I have all 3 colors here. You can see what I'm doing. I'm ripping it off, rolling it into a log. I'm pressing it down. And I did that. I did white, light pink, hot pink, white, light pink, hot pink. And then once I have that all together, I'm going to twist it and roll it out. So when you do it like this, it kind of looks like a candy cane. So if you wanted to, you could just put that into a little hook and make it look like a candy cane. Or I'm just going to make lollipops with this. So I want to roll this out. I don't know, it's like a 1/4 of an inch diameter. It's not very thick. So I'm making sure that I roll it out really thin, and then I'm taking the ends and I'm twisting it to give it more of like a spiral pattern. I wet that skewer underneath some water, and I'm just starting to wrap this around that skewer until I get all the way up to the top. And then I just want to cut off the excess, get a little bit of water down and press that down. And then I'm going to roll it on the countertop just to make sure that it is nice and even. And I can store that in that little styrofoam block. And I did that 3 more times, so I have 4 of those total. And now I'm doing the same thing, except I'm doing round lollipops. So I have pink, white, and hot pink in a log. I'm twisting it, and then I'm rolling it out on my countertop into a really long, thin log. And then I'm cutting off the ends and starting like I did the other one. I'm curling it all in, making sure that I twist it to keep that little twist pattern in there. And sorry, my hand was in the way. Cut it on an angle at the very end, get a little bit of water down and press it down. I hope you could see that. I know my hand's in the way. Sorry about that. And now I just want to make holes in the bottom of all of these with a thin toothpick before I put the skewer in there. The skewers are a little thicker, so I want to start by making a smaller hole, and it'll make it easier to put all the skewers in. This will make sense later as I do it, but do you see how I'm starting at the very bottom? I'm just kind of screwing it in there just to create a hole so they can dry and they already have a hole in them. And let's set those aside. Now I have a cookie sheet, and I just put a cake box lid on top and sprinkled some cornstarch down, and I need to make the little gumballs. She wanted a gumball border on here, so I'm just ripping a piece off, rolling it into my hands and trying to make them the same thickness. And I like to dip it into cornstarch before I put it down. That way it's not going to stick to that cardboard. And this is it sped up, and I wish I could work this fast, but unfortunately this probably took me about 30 to 40 minutes to make all of these, and I'm going to set those aside. Now I got my cake out of the refrigerator. Remember, that cake is cold. I want to start to stack this. My ruler is too small, so this cake was as tall as the ruler. So I'm aligning my straws up against the ruler, marking where I have to cut it off, cutting off that excess piece. And now I'm putting that cut piece next to that long straw to make sure that I cut all of these the same size. That's what I do when my ruler won't fit into a cake. So I put 12 of these in the bottom tier. Let's make sure that it is level. And then I'm getting some icing down and I'm going to put that cake on top. And I already removed it from that cardboard circle, so it was easy for me to stack that. Now, since this is a big cake, I'm triple doweling this. So I'm doing the bottom dowel to the left of center. And I'm going to put that back in the refrigerator while I make this drip. So I have some bright white meltables. I put it in a cup and I melted it. And now I have some gel coloring here. I have some Sugar Flare Claret and some Wilton Rose. So I am adding this gel coloring to these candy melts and it does make it seize. However, I'm adding water to thin this out. So you can use gel colors in your candy melts only if you are thinning it out with some water. When you add water, it naturally darkens it. So I always start with a little bit of color, then I add a little bit of room temperature water. And do you see how it's seized up? It's really thick right now. I have to add a little bit of water at a time to get it to the right consistency. And I do have a video where I go into detail on this process, and that will be linked in the description. So it's still not dark enough. It didn't match the cake, so I had to add a little bit more, and I just want to get this to the correct consistency. And that looks good. It's nice and thin. Let me tap it on the counter to remove the air bubbles. I got my cake out of the refrigerator so that icing is nice and cold and hard. And I'm pouring this into that icing bag, folding down the top and clipping it, and I cut off the tip of that. And now I want to start in the very back, and I'm squeezing these drips down. So I'm starting at the very edge, and I'm moving over to the right a little bit, and then drip a little, over to the right, and then drip a little. And this cake isn't as tall as I wanted it to be, so I feel like these drips were a little too long. I wish I made them shorter, but whatever, it's okay. And then where it meets in the back, then I'm going to start to fill in the very top of the cake. Now, it's weird because you have to get your drip to a correct consistency to get it to work, and it never works. Well, this time it worked, but usually it's like either a little too thick or a little too thin, but whatever. This time the cake gods were on my side. I was very thankful for that. And now I'm taking a spatula and spreading this out. You have to work very fast because this chocolate sets pretty quickly. And what I like to do, and I don't know if other people do this, but this is just my technique, I like to run that spatula under really hot water. So I'm spreading it on there. You don't see me. I'm running it under hot water to clean the spatula, and then I'm coming back to the cake. Do you see that seam there at the very top? I need to remove the seam. So I'm running my spatula under hot water and then trying to bring it back to the cake and smooth out that seam so you can't see where it meets. So I'm using that hot water to smooth this out, but again, you have to work quickly because it's starting to set. It's starting to get a little thick. Now there's going to be another cake on top of here, so it doesn't really matter what it looks like in the middle, but that hot water does kind of turn that a different color. You see how it gives it like a little white hue. So I'm trying to make it as pink as possible around the edges where it's going to be showing, and just trying to smooth it out the best that I can. And here is the drip, and that looks really good. I'm going to put this back in the refrigerator. Now I have a piece of non-slip pad underneath my cutting board so it doesn't slide around, a wet paper towel with an X-Acto knife, a Dresden tool, and a little bit of water. I rolled that white fondant out really thin. It does have that Tylose powder mixed into it. And I'm doing my trace, cut, and smooth method to make this name. So I'm tracing this onto the fondant. I'm going a little bit on the outside of the lettering. That way I can make it a little thicker. And then once that's traced onto the fondant, I'm just taking my X-Acto knife and cutting it out. And then, of course, anytime I cut anything out of fondant, it's going to be a little jagged. So I need to take my fingers and my tools and take my time and smooth it out and make it look nice and pretty. And once that's done, I'm going to align that on top of the picture so it can dry to the correct shape. Now I'm using tappets to make the middle name. So I roll that fondant out super, super thin, let it dry for like 30 minutes, and I'm tapping some of this Crisco into these little cavities and then cutting these letters out. And I do have a video where I go into complete detail on how I use these tappet cutters, and I will link that in the description. But you pop it down there and then the letters pop out, and I'm going to set that aside. Now I'm cutting a big yellow circle. I'm going to make this the background of the name on the lollipop so it really pops. And then I rolled this fondant out. You can see how thin it is, and I'm making these dots for that dot candy strip. So I'm cutting a bunch. I think I used a number 10 tip. I probably could have used the number 12. So I cut dark pink, light pink, and gold. It's going on a white strip. I have that Rollcom Super Gold mixed with the lemon extract. And again, I'm painting this big circle gold. And then these tiny pieces was such a big pain in the butt because I had to pick up each one individually quickly and paint them, because I need them to be painted on the side as well. If I just tried to paint them like that, like having it down on the paper, I wasn't able to cover everything in gold. And once I did one coat, then I went over it again and did a second coat just to deepen it up. And here are all the little dots. I'm going to set those aside. Now I need to paint these yellow balls gold. Why was that so hard to say? So I'm doing each individual one. And again, I have to do 2 coats. So once I have 1 coat done, then I go over it again and do 2 coats. And I'm going to set those aside to dry. And now I have to continue stacking. So I got that out of the refrigerator, and I'm using my ruler now to mark how tall these straws should be. And again, I go over this in my stacking tutorial. I have a tutorial where I go into complete detail on how I stack my cakes. That will be linked in the description. I'm getting the straws down, making sure that everything is level, and then getting down some icing before I stack this next tier on top. And I'm doweling this a little bit over to the right. Now I do have a video where I go into detail on how I dowel big cakes like this, and I will link that in the description. I triple dowel them for more security. And then I'm continuing the stacking process to put on the top tier. And I just want to make sure that that is perfectly center, make sure that it is level, and then I'm doweling through all 4 tiers down into the cake board. And now I have some piping gel, and I want to put all of these little balls down here. So I'm getting a little bit of piping gel underneath and sticking these down to the cake drum. And I'm doing the same order, dark pink, gold, light pink, white, the whole way around. And that looks really nice. I'm going to put this very heavy cake back in the refrigerator while I roll this border. So I'm rolling this white fondant out really long. Then I'm going to take my ribbon cutter, and I'm cutting a wide ribbon for the candy border and a thinner ribbon for the ribbon border, and using my rulers just to straighten everything out. Now let's get down some piping gel so this white fondant will stick to it. I'm starting in the very back, and I'm wrapping this around. And then I'm going to cut it where it meets in the back and press the seam together, and then take my palette knife and press that down. So I want to make sure that that is very even at the very top and it's touching that gold part at the bottom. And then I need to individually place all of these on here. So I'm getting a little bit of piping gel behind each one, and I'm doing 9 at a time. So you need to make sure that they are evenly spaced vertically and horizontally. Once I do 9 of the dark pink, I'm going to do 9 of the gold, and making sure that they are all in the correct position before I continue. You can see how you want to make sure that they are all lined up. And then I did the light pink, and I went around the entire thing. And look how pretty that is. Now I want to get a little bit of piping gel around the bottom part of the gold tier so that white fondant will stick. Start in the very back, wrap it around where it meets in the back, cut it and press the seam together. And then again, taking my palette knife and pressing that down to make sure it looks nice and even and it's touching that pink part underneath it. And then I want to make the bow. I have a weird way of making bows. I'm rolling my white fondant out really thin, cutting it on either side, and then I cut it in half. And then I like to align I took it over to my cake to make sure that it was wide enough, and it was. So I'm aligning one on top of the other, start on one end, go up in the middle, and come down on the other side. And I do have a video where I go into detail on how I make bows, and I will link that below. But I'm going to my cake, making sure that it was the right size, get a little bit of water down, fold it in half, and go up and down. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the other one, fold it in half, and then go up and down. And then I'm going to cut it in the center part so they will sit together flush. And then I'm cutting a little rectangle here out of fondant, and I'm going to fold the edges in just to give it a cleaner look. And then I'm getting water all along the back, and then I'm going to put half of a loop on half, get a little bit of water in between, and then press that other half down, lift that centerpiece up, wrap it around, and then in the very back, get a little bit of water underneath it as I tuck it underneath. And that's how I make my bows. I'm going to put this on a little cutting board, and then I need to make sure that the loops don't lay flat. So I'm ripping a paper towel in half, fold it in half and half again, roll from one end to the other, and stick it in the loop. Again, I'm going to fold this in half and half again, and then roll from one end to the other and stick it in the loop. So this way the loops won't dry flat. They'll have a little bit of shape to them. And now I want to cut the tail, so I have my ribbon cutter and I'm just cutting 2 long ribbons here. And then I just want to cut like the little ribbon detail at the end of each one, on the left side on one and on the right side of the other. And then I'm just cutting straight edges here. Then I'm going to go over to my cake, hold that up, and I want to get a little bit of piping gel behind that centerpiece where it's sticking and press that down. And then I'm getting a little bit of white icing underneath it. I find icing has a little bit of a stronger hold, so I put white icing behind the loops. I remove the paper towel so I can get my fingers behind there and really press this into the correct position, getting a little bit more piping gel behind it to stick it down. Piping gel won't seep out this, like it's clear, so you won't be able to see it seeping out the side, so that will give it a little bit of a better hold, so that thing ain't going nowhere. And then I'm getting some piping gel behind the end piece that's going behind that loop. And then I'm just going to curve this into the correct position, going back and forth into a little wave. And wherever it's touching the cake, I'm getting a little bit of piping gel behind it to stick it down. And just moving this into the correct position. And then I took the other tail on the other side and did the same exact thing. And I want to put the paper towels back in those loops just to make sure that they dry to the correct shape. Now, I put all of these skewers in here and I forgot to film it. So I wet the ends of these little skewers and then I twisted it into those holes that I previously made, and it didn't distort it. You see how I put that name on that lollipop and it wasn't standing out? That's why I made this little gold circle. So I got some piping gel behind it and I stuck it down. And then I'm putting the letters on here first and arranging them into the correct position before I glue them down. Once they're in the right position, I get a little bit of piping gel on the very back and stick them down. And then using my paintbrush just to make sure everything is nice and straight, and let's set that aside. Now I got that extremely heavy cake out of the fridge. Oh my gosh, I have to take a little breather for a second. Oh, it's so heavy. And now I am trying to decorate this cake. So I'm putting these lollipops in here, and what I like to do, I just kind of hold it up and say, do I like it there? Do I like it there? I guess that looks good. So I'm trying to make it look symmetrical on the left and the right. So I'm just kind of holding these up and sticking them down. And the stinking drip in the very front of the cake was crooked, so I put that little lollipop there to hide it. Now, this icing on the top tier was not looking good. There's a lot of marks in it from the gel color that I use, so I'm doing my little textured buttercream technique on here. That's what I like to do when I need to cover up any flaws. So I'm using my spatula and putting a very, very thin coat of icing on here, and then I'm taking my plastic wrap and just balling it up, and I'm turning the turntable and just trying to add a little bit of texture in here. Now I do have a video where I go into complete detail on how I do this technique, and that will be linked in the description. But you can't have a lot of icing on here or else it's going to look sloppy. So I take another clean piece of plastic and I keep going over this a couple times and scraping off any excess icing that's going over the very top of the cake and just trying to get this pattern in here. Remember, that cake is cold and hard. The icing is solid, so I'm not going to mess it up as I do this. And then I'm getting a little bit of piping gel underneath these little extra balls that I had, just looking like little gum balls at the top, and I'm finishing decorating the cake. Now I need to make the ribbon that's going to wrap around this lollipop. I'm cutting a long ribbon, getting one loop on one side, one loop on the other, and then I'm wrapping them around and kind of tying it like you do a shoelace, if you will. And then I have that hot glue gun, and I'm getting a little bit of hot glue on the very back, and then I'm pressing this down on that skewer that's just underneath that lollipop, and I flip it over and take my Dresden tool, and I'm spreading that hot glue on the back of that skewer so it's really wrapped around there. It's not going to fall off, and I'm going to set that aside and let it dry, and then I put it on the cake. And once I got that on the cake, the tails were a little too long, so I'm cutting them on an angle, and here is the cake. How cute is that? So there you go. How cool is this cake? Now I have to say, I do go to the gym and I lift, and I'm so glad that I do, because this cake was so stinking heavy and you need to be able to have the arm strength to move this around. I'm not married. I don't have a big, strong, burly man who can carry my cakes for me. I can do it myself. But anyway, now this cake on the inside, the top tier is a 2-layer torted 6-inch. The second tier is a 2-layer torted 8-inch. The third tier is a 2-layer torted 10-inch. And the bottom tier is a 3-layer not torted 12-inch. And I have a video where I talk about when I tort and when I don't tort my cakes, and that will be linked in the description. And how much did I charge? This one was $1,040 plus an additional $110 for delivery. And she did give me a $100 tip. Why am I doing this? So I was very grateful for that as well. So in total, I got $12.50 for this cake. So I think that's it. What new techniques did you learn in this video? I would love to know. Leave it in the comments below. And just a reminder, I have ebooks with all of my recipes. I have my signature scratch pound cake recipes, my best Dr. Cake Mix recipes, my favorite buttercream icing and filling recipes, along with my favorite numbers and my favorite fonts. So they are all linked below. And I do have a Cake Academy membership program where I can help you elevate your cakes to the next level. All of that information is in the description. Please like this video if you liked it. And if you're enjoying my tutorials, I would be so grateful if you could buy me a coffee. My link is in the description. And I would love it if you would keep in touch on socials and you could check out my website. And if you want to stick around, you can watch this video next and hit subscribe and the bell if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching. I love you guys. And remember, it's cake. Have fun. I will see you on the next one. Bye.